Hello, everyone, and welcome to those who are dropping into the webinar today. See, people are just filtering in the room now. Really looking forward to this session and excited to share some real life experiences of actual real users of conversation intelligence technology. I'm going to assume people who are joining this session today are in kind of one or two places there. They either already have conversation intelligence technology and are thinking of how are others using it, what's the benefit as a sales leader, or maybe you're one of those people who is yet to take the plunge and is kind of thinking, what's all the fuss about? And hopefully we can share some insights and education today. So let's get started. This is 5 proven ways conversation intelligence, or CI as it's shortened down to, can make you a better sales leader. Crucially, not just from me who works for a company who provides this technology, but from someone who has had first-hand experience of using this technology. Quick introduction to my guest today, who's going to be doing a lot of the talking today, is Owen Williams. Owen, do you want to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you do now, and what you did in a previous life that makes you a relevant person to speak on this topic?
Okay, thank you, Richard. Well, thank you again for inviting me to take part today. Very grateful for that. So my business is called Dreamer. It is a B2B sales consultancy, which for the time being is me operating as an independent consultant, and my clients are B2B businesses and salespeople who essentially need to be more profitable, and they haven't yet found the way that they can achieve that. So I help show them the right and best way specific to their needs as to how they can be more profitable. That's what I do for my business nowadays. I have grand designs for taking over the world, of course, but that's going to come some way down the road. What I was doing before that was I was employed with an IT distributor who I still actually do some subcontracted work for. And for the last 10 years of my employment there, I was their sales director, so running the whole sales operations. And that is where I first came across using what it was called before, Refract. And it was a massive game changer for me, which I'm sure we're going to talk all about.
Yeah, awesome. So there we are. So Owen now helping companies become more successful and profitable in their sales team, but has landed at that point from leading sales organizations and using this type of technology. And that's why we were keen to get him involved today, because he has real life experiences of the value that this brought to his business. Before we jump into these kind of top 5 ways that Owen found value in conversation technology, just a little bit of an introduction to Allego. So Allego is a sales enablement platform, and whilst today we're going to be really talking about this bottom left product here, conversation intelligence, Allego is unique in the sense that we actually support 3 key components of modern day sales enablement, from modern learning, which is everything from onboarding and training and making sure that salespeople remember the stuff that they learn in their early part of their career, how we certify them on new products and rollouts, but also how we help salespeople get access to the right content to support them in their sales efforts in their moment of need, helping them with things like virtual selling, and also helping marketing basically get the right content in the hands of the salespeople and tracking to see how effective that content is resonating with the audience. But if I just talk and maybe introduce conversation intelligence for those people who might be thinking, I don't even know what this even means. Conversation intelligence is ultimately, if I go back 7 years ago to when we started Refract now being part of Allego, nobody really knew what this technology was. Nobody had even heard of conversation intelligence, and was really born from my own the idea behind the product was born from my own kind of frustrations as a salesperson, ironically, not as a sales leader, where I was kind of having lots of conversations every day with customers and prospects, but actually those conversations were happening in a bit of a black box. In other words, what I meant by that is I didn't have a clue whether what I was saying was the right thing. Was I running calls in the right way? Was I handling objections in the right way? Was how were other people on my team who were more successful than me? What were they doing differently in those crucial sales conversations, right? Because, we can train people till they're black and blue in the face, but ultimately what they say and do when they're in front of a prospective customer, that's when it all counts. What conversation intelligence does is it gives leadership or the business visibility into those conversations. What's working? What are some of the trends across top performers? It helps sales leaders get quick access to understanding how consistent my sales team talking about pricing. It allows companies to heat seek in conversations to where certain topics are being talked about to make it easy for managers to coach to those specific areas. But also helps managers and sales leaders, I'm sure we're going to get into this, coach their salespeople in these frontline sales conversations, helps them get closer to what's actually happening behind the scenes. Now we all live in this kind of remote world. And as I mentioned, helps us understand, well, what are our top performers talking about? How often are we discussing certain pain points with our customers? Are we talking about certain, are we using certain messaging that we hope our sales team are using? Is that actually happening in the heat of the battle, so to speak? So that kind of gives you a flavor as to what conversation intelligence is. It's analyzing those frontline sales conversations. So without further ado, let's jump into how using this technology helped Owen become a better sales leader, and hopefully many people on this webinar will a lot of what he shares will resonate. Please put in the chat any comments or questions you have if you'd like Owen to go deeper on any one of these points. So what I'm going to do here, Owen, is for each of these points that you've put these forward yourself. This isn't us. We haven't created these points. These are 5 things that Owen has came up with. I'm going to go for each one what your life looked like before using conversation intelligence, and then from there, if we can transition into how conversation intelligence helped you do that thing better. So you've put here number 1, Owen, is timely and relevant feedback. So if you cast your mind back to before you had your hands on this technology, how were you giving feedback to salespeople on their sales calls or their conversations? What did that look like before CI came along?
Okay, so probably pretty traditional, and as you said, I'm sure lots of people will resonate with this. So variety of ways. Old-fashioned, sit next to the salespeople. I'm going to sit right on your shoulder, and I'm going to listen to your call, and then I will give you some feedback straight after the call. So that was one method, and unsurprisingly, that rarely went down well. I could see more often than not salespeople tense up, and obviously were more focused on the fact that I might be sitting in close proximity listening, and instead of focusing on the call. So that was, I used that very sparingly, but it certainly was one method of giving feedback. Another one would be to go into another room and dial into that call and listen in live. So not necessarily having to sit next to them, but still with that ability to listen in live. They would still be aware more often than not that I'd be doing that, because I'd go and disappear into a room which people generally recognize. Owen's gone in there, he's gone into there, listen to some calls. So you'd still sometimes get that reaction where they would tense up, and because they were, understanding I'd be listening in. And also what happened that sometimes IT failed, well, more than sometimes, IT failed, and the other person on the other end was aware that I was also listening into the call, and that blew up in our faces a couple of times because it might not have sought permission to do so. Another method would be to rely on the salesperson to notify me whenever they had finished a call that they wanted to get feedback on. And what that meant, then they'd drop me an email, give me a shout, whatever. Owen, just made that call, could you give me some feedback? I'd dig it out of the system, the call file, listen to the whole thing, to then set some time to go and give them the feedback. What typically happened with that one, though, is that I'd only be given the better calls to coach. Very rarely would a salesperson, especially if they were a new one, and understandably, they wouldn't tell me when they had made a bad call and ask for feedback on that one. So that was a different method, but more often than not, I was only really getting the good calls to coach, where I just say, yeah, reinforce what you're doing, well done, nice. And
just
then,
on that point, you know, we hear that a lot. And if I speak from my own experiences, like the bad calls are the ones where there's the most opportunity for improvement. That's the irony. But the ones that salespeople are less proactive to kind of put forward. And it's really interesting that the point around like having managers kind of sit and kind of live shadow calls. I mean, the ironic thing here is that has actually been happening for a long time. You know, even when you think of field sales, everyone's been to a meeting where their manager has joined them on those meetings. And I often make a bit of a joke about the pitfalls of having managers kind of participate in the meetings, because what usually happens is the sales manager tries to become the superhero, takes over the meeting, the salesperson's pushed to the back seat, and doesn't learn anything. You know, they just watch their manager, who's, you know, maybe done the job done the job longer than them, kind of take all the glory, so to speak. And that method is in itself flawed, but it's something that we have done. You know, it has happened for years, that kind of old-fashioned ride-along has taken place.
Yeah, very traditional. And the final method, and this is the one that when I moved into using the product had the biggest impact on me, as well as the salespeople. But I used to spend, and for several years, I was in this routine of spending a few hours on a Sunday evening, you know, put my children, or my child at the time, to bed. And my wife would be fine, understand that's what I do. And I'd spend a few hours listening back to all of the call files from that previous week, focusing on my newest staff, to listen back to every single call, to ultimately try and find the ones that, you know, I could give some useful feedback. And, you know, finger in the air, that would be, I'd have to listen to 10 calls to find one worth coaching. And then within that call, which could be an average 2-3 minute call, I'd be picking out 30 seconds in total to coach. But I'd have to listen to the other 9 in their whole entirety to be able to find that one, and then listen to all of that one to find that small section that was worth coaching. And then as soon as I was back in the next day, give the person that feedback. But that might be on a call that they made 1 week ago. And whilst feedback is useful in all times, it's obviously the time length that you go between the actual moment it happens and providing the feedback. The longer that goes, the less useful the feedback is. And so that was another pitfall. You know, I knew of no other way. I knew at the time it was really inefficient, but I didn't know of any other way.
So when you found a better way of doing it, how did Conversation Intelligence help you deliver more timely and relevant feedback, as you put it here?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me first make a shout out to your colleague, Mr. Stuart Taylor. He was the man who found me. Yeah, I wasn't actively looking for this because I wasn't aware of it. I can't necessarily remember exactly how, but Stuart found me. He came to me and helped open my eyes. And so from that point on, once I started using the product, you know, gone was those few hours on a Sunday evening. I didn't need to use them then. You know, massive for my personal circumstances.
Right.
You know, the efficiency was amazing. Once I'd really got up to speed with how the platform worked, how we can kind of set up the tags, then getting the users, i.e. the sales staff, set up with their own profiles, starting to embed into them the culture of coming in the morning, log in, check what feedback you've been given on your calls, and embed that culture and get your day started, you know, listening to this feedback, good and, you know, encouraging, to get you started. So really efficient, or it's made it significantly more efficient for me, impact on my personal life positively. Then the ability just to be able to, as this title of this particular one says, give that timely and relevant feedback. You've made a call today, you will get some feedback on that today. You know, And you can action that feedback. You can take it on board. We can discuss further if you want, but it's all timely. And then you apply whatever's been discussed in the next set of calls today.
I think that's so key as well, because talking about how it becomes you're a better sales leader is you're able to impact on their success. I see, so many people have done it the manual way, where the feedback comes, as you say, maybe a week after they've had the call. In that space of time, they've had, X number of conversations more, where they're perhaps making the same mistake, or maybe not using the right messaging, or whatever that thing is, and where that's damaging their success, right? So this kind of concept of saves you time from how you did this before to actually getting that feedback to the salespeople to help impact on their success quicker is a big win.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to point number 2, which is an interesting one. Salespeople up their game. So again, let's cast our mind before Conversation Intelligence. You had this in your hands. What were maybe some of your concerns about, how your salespeople were performing when you maybe didn't have they didn't have the insight into how they were selling, or they were maybe kind of not that conscious that you were kind of listening in and listening to their calls retrospectively?
Yeah, I mean, that routine I explained that I was in for several years, the sales team were familiar with that. So, come the expectation, come Monday morning, Owen's going to pull some time aside for us, and we're going to spend an hour or two, whatever, going through calls and feedback. And so, that wasn't, I wasn't completely blind as to what they were saying. And they were well aware that I would be reviewing that. However, there was still a massive reliance on the salesperson being honest enough to highlight to me when maybe a call hadn't gone well.
Right.
We had a great team, and we were bringing in new people quite regularly. But again, they would be very reluctant to share with me when they weren't necessarily performing well. But they might not even been aware of when they weren't performing well, because they were typically rookies. Right. And a point you just made a minute ago about that time frame between, in the old way of giving the feedback, which may be a week. Yes, one of the major problems there would be that they could be reinforcing the bad habit.
Right.
Yeah, because it'd been a week before I give them the feedback, they might have spent all the rest of the week saying the same thing, and then they're becoming more familiar with it. I get to the next week and go, no, we need to change that, and they need to unwind everything they do. So they were the typical problems, but a lot of it was just reliance on them being honest and feeling confident enough to be honest with me, and then just looking at the black and white numbers on the board.
Yeah. And obviously, Conversation Intelligence analyzes every conversation and can surface to you the most, important calls, the most important moments of calls, the moments of calls that you care about. So how did you see that impacting how the salespeople were actually performing when they were in these crucial sales conversations as a result?
Yeah, well, when they knew that they would be able to get very quick feedback, a very efficient process for doing it. Not only were the rookies uplifted by that, but the senior staff were as well, because the license, we had recorded all of the calls, where for the senior staff, the most relevance was that they were aware we would use their calls, good and bad, for creating our library of resource for the new people to listen to, and before finding Refract, that was a very piecemeal process. Again, linked to me spending Sunday evenings. I then pick out and go, well, that was an example of a bad call. Let's put it in the library. That was a good one. But once everybody knew the capabilities of the product and how we were going to use it, yes, you could see there was a tangible uplift amongst the team, and an awareness of what they were saying and how they were approaching their calls.
One of the things that we sometimes hear, Owen, is that when people people don't have a culture of recording sales calls for the purpose of, coaching or improvement. Sometimes some of the biggest resistance comes from the more experienced or the people who are highest performers, because they're like, well, why do I need this now? How did you best manage that with the people on your team who were maybe the more tenured or some of the most more experienced people?
How did we manage that? Well, I never had any of the senior staff, outright complain, that they didn't want their calls recording, because it had been in place for so long before we even started using the product. Yeah, standard thing. This call's going to be recorded for training purposes. A message we had playing for years. I would, from time to time, give them feedback, and more often not, it was well received. I like to think I had the respect of the team, but it was mainly because they had a great culture within the business that all of the salespeople learnt from being supported by the senior ones previous to them, and that was an ongoing culture. So as people became senior, it was just a natural expectation. Well, look, you're here to support the next generation. It happened for you, and it's an ongoing thing, a perpetual thing. So as part of that, we will use your calls. I will, out of respect to you, just check with you that you're happy for this call to be used. Yeah. And sometimes I'm going to highlight to you a call that you and I could probably both agree wasn't so great, but it's important to be used in the library to highlight why it wasn't great and how people can improve.
What I love there is the fact that you used their experience and like, hey, I'm going to use some of the good stuff that you do, and you kind of put them on a pedestal. And we often find that's a good way of getting those top performers or more experienced people kind of use the fact that you're going to leverage moments of their conversations to help people who are new to the role. And the fact that you had a culture where those types of people are willing to get better as well is great, and it's kind of what everyone should be striving for. So the next thing that you put forward is that Conversational Intelligence helped you scale coaching. So I guess before we come on to how it did that, what were some of the challenges that you faced? And I think you've already kind of hinted at some of these with your Sunday evenings wading through lots of calls, but what were some of the kind of personal concerns that you had around when you've got one of you and lots of them on the sales team, around how you could actually scale yourself as a coach? What were some of the kind of concerns that maybe you had, even maybe you weren't directly aware of those concerns, but in hindsight, looking back, maybe you were in that you were maybe concerned about spreading yourself too thin?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great graphic, by the way. I did not choose that, but I like the graphic there. Yeah, absolutely valid concern, because that wasn't my sole remit to just spend time coaching calls. I had to deliver. I had to contribute individually to the sales results. Clearly, as the sales director, I was responsible for ensuring the target was hit, as well as delivering my own number. I did my own new business development. And so you're absolutely right. There were many, many times where, despite being hyper-organized, which anybody who knows me well will back that up, I still found plenty of times I was like, time management, I was unable to do this. And so trying to prioritize which is more important to do, that was a constant juggle of things to do. And clearly I wouldn't get it right all of the time. One of the major challenges in giving the coaching was, in addition to what I've explained I already did, would be actually then delivering that feedback. Am I writing out an email there and then whilst it's fresh in my mind? Would I spend time writing out a bespoke email to that individual? This call here, copy and pasting, or couldn't transcribe the call. That we didn't have. It was literally an MP3 file or something. So I'd have to type it out, transcribe it, this bit here. Yeah. Or do I then set time aside the next day to speak with that individual? Do I do it en masse? And all the time I'm taking time away to do that, it's impacting my time to do elsewhere. Constant challenge for me. And again, one I'm sure which was resonating.
Yeah. And we hear this a lot, like one of the biggest reasons that coaching doesn't happen as much as it should is time. And it's, time and time pressures as a sales leader is a very real thing, right? You're spinning lots of plates. You're coaching, you're managing, you're recruiting, you're onboarding, you're maybe even carrying a bag yourself. All these things, you're reporting up to senior leadership. So it's no wonder that coaching becomes a pinch point, coaching time. But all the while, it's like you sit there and you think, well, actually, it's the number one thing I can be doing to get better results from the existing team. Easier said than done. So how did Conversation Intelligence help you scale your coaching efforts then? What were some of the things that you used or you saw, you leveraged to kind of start to create more Owens in the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because of the time saved, that then naturally afforded me more time to be able to deliver feedback. But in addition to that, it was the automated functions, where you could set it up to recognize particular tags, words on a call, and then listen out, right, what was said next. And then you could set it up so that you could just automate a message, a generic message. So say, for example, you set it up, competitor A. Whenever you hear the competitor A mentioned in the call, are you hearing any of this next? If not, here's a generic video I've created once to give that feedback to that individual. I don't need to name them. It doesn't need to be, hi, Richard. It's just be, hi, I can even say this is a generic message, but relevant to what you said. We heard this in this call. We didn't hear any of this. Maybe next time say that. Create that once, automate that. That's then job done. I don't need to do that every time. And I'd get sometimes from salespeople go, I keep getting these emails from you. It's the same point. And when they come to me about that, they would be frustrated. Oh, and I keep getting these emails. It's a bit time consuming with me. We're going over the same point. But then I'd easily spin that around and go, have you heard what you've just said? You've just said to me, you're getting repetitive messages about the same point. Does that not say to you that you keep on making the same mistake in the call? So that was an easy one to kind of switch around. You to get, fair enough. I'll make that change. Stop getting these messages. But some of those automated features where you can just create the message once, spit out an email, which is either got a video or the message, and that is therefore scaling the coaching.
And that's that's one of the key aspects of conversation intelligence technology is it can help you automate some of the coaching that your reps are getting, and that coaching still comes from you. You record those you could record those videos, but the reality is that on the calls that you don't get the chance to listen to, you have the confidence that your salespeople are still getting that reinforcement that some of them crave, quite frankly. And again, kind of alleviate some of the pressures off your shoulders. All right, let's keep on going. So this is a very common one that we see that you've put forward and nominated here, is that it helped you, Conversation Intelligence helped you accelerate the onboarding and ramp of new hires. So maybe talk about like what your life was like before Conversation Intelligence, of like, how did you share to a new hire kind of what good sounds like or what bad sounds like, and maybe talk us through some of the challenges with that.
Yeah, so the actual creation of a library of calls was time consuming, on my behalf in the old way. As I've explained, listening back to the files, then downloading those files out of the system, putting them over here. That was time consuming in my perspective, but once created, it was there available. But where it was still inefficient, and you get a newbies, and as part of their onboarding training, you have various parts in their schedule where go and sit in the back room, listen to that library of calls. Where it was inefficient was that they would still have to listen to maybe all of the call to only be able to pick out a small section of each one that was very worthwhile them hearing, good or bad, unless I had gone to the extra level, which I did time to time, of actually tagging in a Word file linked to the recording, listen to this specific section of the call.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't do that very often because that was even more time consuming to do. But yeah, so it was still inefficient to put them in the back room and get them to listen through to a section of calls without any really kind of strategic plan for doing so, apart from listen to a bunch of calls for the next 2 hours, and then we'll discuss them.
Yeah, and you're speaking there as someone who had the benefit of that you were actually recording calls. Many companies don't even have that. So what we tend to see in those cases is people get a new hire on board and they say, right, what I want you to do is shadow some calls. We've got, there looks to be, the odd call. If you can convince your account executive or BDM to allow you to come in, or SDR to allow you to sit on calls, that doesn't happen proactively. And even still, it might be that actually the number of calls that they get the chance to listen to in that first week to 2 weeks is actually quite limited. They might end up listening to a handful of conversations at which is difficult when you're trying to have a vast coverage of calls for different scenarios, different types of prospects, different stages of the sales cycle, good and bad examples for each of those. So I imagine some people who are watching this probably are in a position where they're thinking, wow, I don't even have any calls for people to listen to. We try and do that shadowing, and often what happens is that the learning curve is slower because they're consuming less content, essentially. So talk us through then, Owen, how did that whole process become easier when you had Conversation Intelligence?
Yeah. So just as one final point in the life before, we would as well from time to time actually get them to dial in and listen to some live cold calling from some of the team. But what we found more often than not was, whilst that would give a proper real life example of you're not going to connect every call, that's important for people to understand, but it would still be more often than not a bit of a waste of time because they might be sitting there for an hour to only listen to 1 or 2 calls.
Right.
So that's how it looked previously.
Yeah.
After using it, not only were we more professional in creating this library, because you're a newbie, you've got a license. Here you go. Here's your own portal. And we've already put all of the calls into your library. And once you've been trained on how to use it at a base level, you can go into each call and you know exactly the points in the call because they've been tagged that you can go and listen to. And so, of course, that was significantly more efficient, as well as their impression of us as an employer was much better as well. It was still decent before because obviously they had no benchmark. And as you said, at least we were recording calls and we were able to create a library. So we still were creating a good impression with our new staff, but it was enhanced even more when we had this platform because it all looked so professional, and it's just easy. Go into here. There's the tag. You can see it clearly, see what that note says, listen to it, and then we'll discuss it later. And then when we discuss it later, we can all be really efficient with our time then as well, because we'll just zone into the right points of the call.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that we see a lot of customers do today is they want to create libraries, like just of example calls really quickly. So for example, they say, hey, I want to just create a library of like 10 example calls where we're up against this competitor. So they literally search for that competitor's name. They're literally provided with a list of 10 examples. And it's like, boom, they can put them into a library. Hey, show me calls where the salesperson is talking about this feature of our product. And here's 10 examples of them doing that. It's just a very fast way of building out a library, which is truly invaluable when you do hire new people. Like I ask any new salesperson, what's one of the most valuable things that if you could choose, you would find yourself doing in your onboarding? And most of them say, just listen to calls. Pretty much can learn a lot of what I need to learn just by listening to real sales conversations, because you hear everything from the common questions that the salespeople ask, the common questions they get asked by prospects, objections, competitive situations, how to position the product. It's all in the calls, and that's often what the new sales hires crave more than anything else.
Can I just add one very important bit to that as well.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Previously, life before, there would be a big emphasis on me sitting down with the people and talking through my way of going about it. Yeah. And in doing so, I'd be very clear to the salespeople, look, this is just my way. This works for me. I'm not saying you need to follow me like a robot word for word. We'll have some scripts, but again, you don't need to read them word for word. You need to understand what we're trying to achieve, put your own personality around it. One of the other benefits from creating the library, and that was obviously pre-refract and afterwards, but still one of the benefits was that they would be exposed to a variety of styles. It wasn't just me. Yeah. And so they would hear various openers, various ways of asking the same question, but we posed in different ways. And it would really help them start to create their own script, essentially. Yeah. Put their own personality around it. Massive, massive benefit from creating that library. So
awesome. No, good, great input. So this is a really interesting one. I think this is the last one, is Conversational Intelligence helped you as a sales leader create a coaching culture, or even just enhanced one that already exists. So, from what you've said to me so far, and it feels like even before you had Conversational Intelligence, you had that coaching culture that many companies probably strive for, and it maybe just made that bit better. Maybe you can talk about companies that you've worked with or that you've seen that perhaps doesn't have that coaching culture, and some of the kind of knock-on impacts that you see that having for companies.
You're right. You're absolutely right. We did already have a very established coaching culture. And so I'm very much the second part of that. It enhanced one that already existed. As for other businesses, I've encountered over the years, whether they've been customers of mine, whether we've been a customer of theirs. Yeah, I've seen numerous sales teams where they have been so very old-fashioned. It's like, right, well, here's your intro booklet, your employee handbook. Yeah. What we need you to do is we need you to make a load of calls. Here's your list over here. Here's your PC. Good luck. We'll catch up in a week or so. Yeah. And zero feedback. And, unsurprisingly, more often than not, you can't build a high performing team like that. There's so much noise about it. It's a great picture you've got there to emphasize, because it's an analogy I very often use about athletes. Look at any sports that's played at a professional level, they have a coach. There's a coach, yeah. And these are people who are at the top of their very game, but yet they still need a coach. Absolutely need a coach to help them maintain their levels, if not continue improving. So why doesn't the logic apply throughout business? And it doesn't. You're right, Richard. Still plenty of businesses where they just don't have that. And I find that as well, where in what I'm actually doing now, I have inquiries where, for training inquiries, I need my salespeople to get out using the phone more often. Okay, fine. Let's diagnose that. Let's make sure we really understand, is that actually the root problem you have? Can you come in and do half a day workshop? Okay, what's your thinking there? What's going to happen next? Well, no, I just want you to do half a day workshop and that's it. Yeah. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. You're only throwing your money away. The only one who wins out of that is potentially my pocket, and I don't really earn that much from it. So I'm not going to do that. What I suggest is we have a program of training delivered over a period of time to help reinforce. But then after that, once I'm finished, if you haven't got a coaching culture to help continue reinforcing, again, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So it goes very hand in hand. I think I saw a post on LinkedIn from Kate at Enable recently about this very point. There is no point training people if there's not an ongoing culture program of reinforcing and coaching. It's just an absolute waste of everybody's time. And so it's a big move to go from not having a culture to then looking to implement one. But I'd imagine most underperforming businesses, that will probably be one of their major problems, major reasons why.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the challenge that I see with people who don't have a coaching culture is that their managers don't have anything to coach from or coach off, you know. And this is I often use this analogy of, well, um, if you were a sports coach, um, and you couldn't actually watch how your team perform, whether that's football, cricket, golf, tennis, whatever the sport, it's very hard to actually coach them. If you can't actually watch the person perform, you don't know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they did well, what they should do more of, what they need to tweak. And as such, probably the coaching just doesn't happen as a result. If you can't see anything happening, it's very hard to coach. And so probably that's where coaching doesn't happen. Which is kind of where conversation intelligence comes along, is it actually gives people who don't have a coaching culture, or to your point, enhances what I'm sure you're going to talk about this, it actually gives them something to coach from. They get to see how their sales team actually sell in practice. And from there, coaching happens when you get to actually observe how people perform. So on that point, Owen, tell us a little bit how CI went that bit further just to enhance the culture that you'd already built in the team.
Yeah. Well, I've used the word numerous times during this session already, but the efficiency, the efficiency of being able to identify that feedback and deliver it. Yeah, that
Right.
was a massive evolution for our business, for me individually, and for the recipients. Having that time, we wouldn't need to go and sit in an office for an hour or two, spending that time listening back to calls. They could just come in the morning, spend the first hour going through their portal and looking at the calls. Yeah, no big impact on their day. They're still on the floor. They're still maybe listening in proxy to other conversations that are going on. Massive benefit there. It was really professional as well, or enhanced, our professionalism already, which created a really great impression with new staff. You could see they were coming in and go, wow, I feel like I'm going to be really supported here. These guys have got my back. They've not only got my back, they've got the tools to have my back. And it all looks very great. I have joined something amazing here. I need to make sure I grab this opportunity with both hands, and I perform to the very best, because these lot are the A-team. Yeah, so that was something that was very noticeable. You'd see these new people come in, and they would just look around and see high performers, see our infrastructure, see our culture, and automatically we did have some who would melt and crumble and go, I don't feel confident I could do this, and they wouldn't come back. But the rest of them would be like, wow, I really need to earn my stripes here, because this is a serious business.
Yeah, love that. And one of the other things that we see as well, as far as building on that coaching culture, we see people use this technology to share across the team. It kind of doesn't just rely on the manager to be the one coaching. Like, people start to coach each other, people sharing good examples, or hey, you've just closed a deal. Have you got the call that led to that successful outcome? What can I take from what you're doing that I'm not doing? Just creates a brilliant culture of like collaboration, teamwork, support. And again, just doesn't add on time onto your day as a sales leader. It actually frees that up.
Well, with that one, you've just actually reminded me of, there were numerous times once we'd embedded using Refract as part of our culture, I would then get people approach me going, Owen, have you seen that call I've just made? Yeah, have you seen it? Has it come up on your thing yet? Have you seen it? It was a really good one. And I'd actually have it the other way around as well. Owen, has it come up on your portal yet? That call I just made, it was a bit of a stinker. And because we'd embedded this in, that started, that was a kind of a development amongst the team. Whereas they'd been previously a bit hesitant about, sharing bad or good calls. Then now it was very much the other way. Have you seen the portal? Yeah, has it come up with it?
Yeah, love that. Awesome. Well, I guess just to wrap up then. So, we've Owen's talked about how conversation intelligence helped him deliver more timely and relevant feedback to salespeople it helped him basically in action feedback on calls that same day versus a week later, and how that can actually help to drive better sales results, because salespeople can put into practice some of the stuff that they can improve, versus going a week making the same mistakes. Talk to us how it actually helps salespeople up their game. People have a lot of concerns about, hey, my sales conversation's being recorded. Big Brother's watching me. Well, actually, what we tend to see is that salespeople actually use it as a way to take themselves up to the next level. Who doesn't want salespeople to up their game? If they know that there's going to be increased visibility in how they're executing, which sales leader doesn't want that? Which salesperson doesn't want to up their game? More to the point. We've talked about how it helps scale coaching. That one of the big value points of Conversation Intelligence for Owen was that it helped him kind of replicate himself across, his coaching time, which was at a premium. How you can trigger relevant coaching and feedback to sales reps on their calls based on things that happen in those conversations, or simply helps him do more with his time by finding and heat seeking to the right points in conversations. Also touched upon how it helped to accelerate ramp of new hires, being able to build those libraries of the good, the bad, and the ugly conversations, those calls that new salespeople really love to listen to and learn from, and how that just accelerates their learning curve when they join the business. Then finally, Owen talked about how Conversation Intelligence in his position actually enhanced a coaching culture that already existed. It helped him build a culture where salespeople felt confident and enthusiastic to kind of share calls that were going well or conversations that weren't going well. But for many people not in that position, this becomes a mechanism for you to make coaching actually happen. It helps you build a culture that you don't have. If you want to connect with myself or Owen, just scan the little QR codes with your phones there. That'll take you to our LinkedIn profiles and to connect. That brings us to the end of the time today. Hopefully that was valuable for anybody who's either using Conversation Intelligence technology or is thinking about using it. Owen, really appreciate your time, and hope to see you on another one of our webinars very soon. Please reach out with any questions, and we'll speak to you very soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.